Lauren smirked, rolling her eyes, the way she always did when she wanted to dismiss Ryan without actually listening. "Ryan, stop overreacting. You're not going anywhere." She leaned back against the kitchen counter, wineglass in hand, her confidence radiating from every movement. She had always been like this, so sure of her power over him, so certain that he would stay no matter what she did, no matter how many times she pushed him away, just to pull him back again when it suited her. Ryan had tolerated it for years, convincing himself that love was about patience, about weathering the storm. He had built a life with her, endured the sharp-edged words, the subtle dismissals, the constant tests of his devotion. But tonight, something shifted. It wasn't the first time she had belittled him, made it seem like his feelings were just some minor inconvenience. It wasn't even the worst thing she had ever said, but it was the moment he finally saw her for what she was. Not a passionate woman who needed reassurance, not someone who was afraid of losing love and acted out because of it. No. She was just someone who took him for granted, who saw him as an option, an accessory to her life rather than a partner. He smiled back at her, but it wasn't the defeated smile she expected. It wasn't the tired, exasperated look of a man who would fight for her attention just one more time. No, this time it was different. "You're right," he said simply, his voice calm, almost pleasant. Lauren barely noticed. She had already turned away, scrolling through her phone, probably texting one of her friends about how dramatic he was being. It wasn't until later that night, when she heard the sound of a suitcase zipper, that something in her brain finally registered that something was off. She walked into the bedroom, leaning against the doorframe, watching as Ryan carefully folded his clothes, placing them into the suitcase with an eerie sense of calm. "What are you doing?" she asked, half a laugh in her voice, as if the answer was so obvious that she didn't need to hear it. "I'm leaving," he said, not looking up. Lauren let out a sharp breath, shaking her head. "Oh, come on, Ryan. You're not serious." But he didn't respond. He just kept packing, methodically, without anger, without hesitation. For the first time in their marriage, Lauren felt something unfamiliar creeping up her spine. Doubt. Lauren crossed her arms, standing in the doorway, watching Ryan pack. Her smirk had faded, replaced by something else. Mild annoyance, maybe even confusion. She had seen him upset before, frustrated even, but he had never done something like this. He was the type to stay, to talk things through, to sleep on the couch, but never walk out the door. "Okay, Ryan," she said, sighing as if this was just another one of his moody episodes. "I get it. You're trying to make a point. But can you stop being ridiculous? You're not actually leaving." Ryan didn't respond. He folded another shirt, smoothing out the creases before placing it into the suitcase. It wasn't rushed. He wasn't throwing things around in anger. He was methodical, controlled, as if he had already made this decision long before tonight. Lauren frowned, shifting her weight. "Ryan," still nothing. That was when something inside her twisted. A small but sharp flicker of something she hadn't felt before. Unease. Ryan was always the one who held on, who fought for their marriage even when she pushed him away. He was patient, predictable, safe. But there was nothing safe about the way he was acting now. She stepped closer, reaching for his arm. "Look, if this is about earlier, I was joking. You know how I am. Don't make a big deal out of this." He finally looked up at her, and for a split second she expected to see that same old look, the one that told her he just needed a little convincing, that he was hurt but still willing to be pulled back in. But his eyes weren't pleading. They weren't searching for an apology, weren't waiting for her to throw him a bone. They were steady, resolved. "I'm done, Lauren." Her hand dropped from his arm. "Done?" The word rang in her ears, louder than anything else he had ever said to her. She had always assumed she was in control, that no matter how far she pushed, he would always be there when she decided to pull him back. And yet, he was standing right in front of her, slipping away like sand through her fingers. She scoffed, shaking her head, trying to mask the sudden tightness in her chest. "Oh, come on, Ryan, you're being dramatic." He zipped the suitcase shut. A flicker of irritation sparked in her. He was really committing to this act? Fine, two could play that game. "You're leaving?" she challenged, tilting her chin up, arms crossing again. "All right, where are you gonna go, huh? Your name's on this house. We have joint accounts. You think you can just walk away?" Ryan didn't rise to the bait. He simply picked up the suitcase and carried it to the door. Lauren followed, feeling her irritation shifting into something sharper. "Oh, I see. You just need space, right? A little time to cool off? You'll be back in a few days. You always come back." Ryan turned to her, and for the first time in years, she saw something that made her stomach sink. He wasn't angry, he wasn't hurt. He wasn't begging for her to see him, to fight for him, to even acknowledge the damage she had done. He was free. It was done, and she had never even seen it coming. Panic started creeping in, though she masked it well. "Ryan, stop. Just sit down and let's talk. You're really going to throw everything away over a stupid argument?" He let out a small chuckle, shaking his head. "Lauren, this isn't about one argument. This is about every argument. Every time you dismissed me. Every time you tested how far you could push before I'd break. I just finally realized I don't have to take it. I don't have to stay." She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Because for the first time in their marriage, Ryan was making the choice, and it wasn't her. Lauren watched in stunned silence as he walked out the front door, suitcase in hand, not slamming it behind him, not making a show of his exit. He didn't have to, because she finally understood. He wasn't trying to teach her a lesson. He wasn't hoping she would chase after him. He was simply gone. The door shut with an unsettling softness, leaving Lauren standing in the middle of their home, staring at the space where Ryan had just been. The air felt different, thinner, heavier. She had expected him to slam the door, to shout, to say something that would let her know this was just another one of their fights, that he would be back once he cooled down. But he hadn't, and that terrified her. She let out a sharp breath, shaking her head, trying to push down the strange knot forming in her chest. This was ridiculous. He was acting ridiculous. He was upset now, but he would come to his senses. He always did. Lauren grabbed her phone and scrolled to his contact, her fingers hesitating over the call button. She wasn't going to beg, that wasn't her. But she needed to talk to him, to knock some sense into him, to remind him that this was their life, their home, and he wasn't going to just walk out like that. She pressed call, 1 ring, 2 rings, then call declined. Her grip tightened around the phone. He had never done that before. Ever. No matter how bad their arguments got, no matter how frustrated he was, he always answered. And when he didn't, he would text. There was nothing. Lauren scoffed, tossing the phone onto the couch. He was being petty. Fine, let him have his little tantrum. He would come back once he realized that she wasn't going to chase after him. To distract herself, she poured another glass of wine and put on the TV, flipping through channels absent-mindedly. But nothing held her attention. The silence of the house started pressing in, the empty space where Ryan's presence had always been feeling more noticeable with every second that passed. She glanced at the front door. An hour passed, then another. Still no call, no text, nothing. Lauren sat back, crossing her arms tightly over her chest. She wasn't going to play this game. He wanted her to panic, to call him over and over, to show up wherever he was staying, but she wouldn't. She wasn't going to give him the satisfaction, so she went to bed, but sleep didn't come easy. The bed felt too big, the sheets too cold. She tossed and turned, reaching out on instinct for the other side, his side, before catching herself and pulling her hand back. She had spent years pushing him away, testing his patience, convinced that no matter what, he would always be there. But now, lying alone in their bed, she realized something that sent a chill down her spine. For the first time in their marriage, she didn't know if he would come back. The next morning, Lauren woke up groggy, her head aching from the restless night and the wine. She grabbed her phone, expecting at least a text. Nothing. She sat up, rubbing her temples, frustration bubbling up inside her. He was really dragging this out? Fine, if he wanted to act like a child, she would handle this herself. She got up and checked his closet, expecting to see most of his clothes still there. But the moment she pulled open the doors, her stomach clenched. It was nearly empty. The hangers that once held his suits, his favorite jackets, the shirts she always nagged him about folding properly, gone. She pulled open the drawers. Most of his socks, gone. His cologne, gone. His watch, gone. That's when she finds underwear in a closet. And $12 billion. Not to mention probably dozens of other items. She stepped back, her heartbeat picking up. This wasn't a dramatic exit. This wasn't a temporary break. He had planned this. Her breathing quickened as she moved through the house, checking for more signs, looking for something, anything, that told her he wasn't serious. But the more she searched, the more obvious it became. His laptop, gone. His books, the ones he actually cared about, missing. The framed photo of them from their wedding day that had always sat on his nightstand? Not there. Lauren's hands clenched into fists. This wasn't happening. This wasn't real. She grabbed her phone again, dialing his number. It went straight to voicemail. She tried again. Same thing. Her stomach twisted painfully. She went to their bank app, a habit she had always used to check finances, ready to see if he had done anything drastic. And then she saw it. Their joint account, nearly empty. The credit card with both their names on it, canceled. Lauren's breath caught in her throat. Ryan had always been measured, patient, never one for reckless decisions. If he had done this, if he had gone through the trouble of removing himself from everything so neatly, so quietly, he wasn't coming back. Lauren staggered back, sinking onto the couch. She had spent so long believing she had control, believing she could push and push and push, and he would always stay. But now, for the first time, she was the one left behind, and the realization hit her like a brick to the chest. Ryan was gone, and she had no one to blame but herself. Lauren sat on the couch, staring blankly at her phone's screen. It had been an hour since she checked their bank account, an hour since she fully grasped what Ryan had done, and yet she still couldn't bring herself to process it. She tried calling him again, straight to voicemail. She tried texting, delivered, but no response. Her fingers trembled as she typed another message, this time laced with irritation instead of concern. Lauren, Ryan, answer me. This is childish. Where the hell are you? Minutes passed. Then, a single notification. Message blocked. Her breath hitched. No, that wasn't possible. She quickly opened her contacts and scrolled to his name, pressing the call button again, only to be met with an automatic, "This number is not accepting calls from you." Block. Lauren dropped the phone onto her lap, her hands curling into fists. She clenched her jaw, trying to suppress the wave of panic that crashed into her. He had never done this before. Ever. No matter how angry he was, no matter how much she pushed, he had never cut her off. Until now. She shot up from the couch, pacing back and forth across the living room. This wasn't happening. It was just another fight. A big one, yes, but a fight nonetheless. He just needed time, and when he finally got over himself, he'd realize how ridiculous he was being. But deep down, that certainty wavered. Her eyes darted toward the front door, and suddenly, the silence of the house became suffocating. She had always enjoyed her space, had always liked knowing Ryan was there, but not necessarily needing to acknowledge him unless she wanted to. But now the emptiness felt overwhelming. It wasn't just space. It was absence. It was loss. And it was her fault. Lauren grabbed her keys. She wasn't going to sit here waiting. She was going to find him, demand an explanation, remind him that this was their life and he didn't get to just erase himself from it. She drove to his office, expecting to see his car in its usual spot. It wasn't there. Her heart pounded as she marched inside, straight to the front desk. The receptionist, Megan, a young woman who had always been polite but distant, looked up, her expression immediately shifting into something guarded. "Lauren." Megan's voice was careful. Lauren crossed her arms. "Where's Ryan?" Megan hesitated. "He doesn't work here anymore." The words hit her like a slap. "What?" "He resigned a week ago." Lauren's stomach flipped. "That's not possible." "I'm sorry," Megan said. And for the first time, Lauren caught something in her tone. She swallowed hard. "Did he say where he was going?" Megan hesitated, then shook her head. "No." Lauren's head spun. "A week ago? He had quit a week ago?" That meant this wasn't impulsive. This wasn't just a reaction to last night. He had been planning this. She turned on her heel and walked out of the building, the walls closing in on her. The realization settled deep in her chest, sharp and unforgiving. Ryan hadn't just left her. He had erased himself from her life entirely. Her next stop was his parents' house. If anyone knew where he was, it would be them. She rang the doorbell 3 times before his mother, Evelyn, answered. The older woman took one look at her and sighed. "Lauren, where is he?" Lauren demanded. Evelyn crossed her arms, her expression unreadable. "He told me you might show up." Lauren's throat tightened. "And?" Evelyn studied her for a long moment before stepping aside. "Come in." Lauren exhaled sharply and walked inside, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. She had always liked this house, had always felt comfortable here, but today It felt foreign. Evelyn led her to the kitchen, where she poured herself a cup of coffee, moving at an unhurried pace. Lauren's patience wore thin. "Evelyn, please, just tell me where he is." The older woman took a sip of her drink before setting it down, folding her hands in front of her. "He doesn't want you to know." Lauren blinked. "Excuse me? He asked us not to tell you," Evelyn said simply. "He said he needs space, and that you'll understand why." Lauren felt the sting of those words. She didn't want to understand. She wanted to fix this. "I get that he's upset," she said, her voice wavering for the first time. "But he's making a mistake. He can't just—" "He can," Evelyn interrupted. "And he did." Lauren's breath hitched. Evelyn softened, but there was steel in her voice. "Ryan gave you years, Lauren. He loved you. But love isn't supposed to be one-sided, and for too long it was." Lauren flinched. "That's not true," Evelyn sighed, shaking her head. "If it wasn't, he'd still be here." Lauren clenched her fists. "So, that's it? I just have to accept that he's gone?" Evelyn met her gaze. "You don't have a choice." The words hit like a wrecking ball. For years she had tested Ryan, knowing he would always be there. But now, standing in his mother's kitchen, hearing the finality in her voice, Lauren realized something she never thought possible. She had finally pushed too far, and this time there was no coming back. The days following her conversation with Evelyn felt like an endless blur. Lauren couldn't remember the last time she had felt so empty, so utterly disconnected from everything she had taken for granted. The house, once a place filled with conversations, laughter, and the hum of everyday life, now seemed like a hollow shell. There was no comfort to be found in its walls anymore. It was just a house, a place where memories clung to every corner, every piece of furniture, but it no longer felt like home. Lauren found herself moving through the motions of her day. She went to work, made small talk with colleagues, and went through the motions of daily life. But nothing held her attention. Her thoughts were consumed by Ryan, by the absence of him, by the complete erasure of their life together. She hadn't heard from him since that night, and the silence was suffocating. She tried to convince herself that he would eventually call, that he would break down and realize he made a mistake. He had to, didn't he? She had always been able to sway him in the past, to pull him back when he'd gotten too far away. But this time she knew, deep down, that things were different. One evening, after another long day at work, Lauren found herself sitting on the couch staring at her phone. She unlocked it, scrolling through old pictures of her and Ryan, the ones they had taken on trips or at family gatherings. In every photo they looked happy, smiling, carefree, together. It felt so distant now, like it had been someone else's life, someone else's happiness. But it was hers. It was real, and it was gone. Her finger hovered over the message icon, but she hesitated. She had sent so many messages in the past few days, texts and emails, each one getting increasingly desperate as she tried to get his attention. None had been answered. None had even been read. She knew that he had blocked her on every possible platform, and yet part of her still hoped for a reply. She wanted him to break, to crack, and let her back in. But she couldn't bring herself to send another one. Lauren let out a shaky breath, setting her phone down on the coffee table. The room felt too quiet, too still. She stood up, walking over to the window and looking out at the city below. The night was still, the streets bathed in the dim glow of streetlights. The world outside continued to move, but here, in her apartment, time felt suspended. She hadn't fully understood what she had until it was gone. Ryan had been there, patient, steady, a constant in her life. She had always known that he loved her, but she had never truly understood the depth of his love. It was only now, in the aftermath of everything, that she realized how much she had taken him for granted. Lauren had spent so long testing him, pushing him to see how much he would endure, believing that love meant waiting, that love meant putting up with her selfishness, her dismissiveness, her arrogance. She had been wrong. Love wasn't about endurance. Love was about respect, about mutual care and understanding. She had lost that, and now she had lost him. The reality of it all hit her like a tidal wave. She had done this to herself. The man she had once vowed to cherish, the man who had always been there for her, was gone. And it wasn't because of some external force or circumstance. It was because of her. It was because she had refused to acknowledge his worth until it was too late. That night, as Lauren lay in bed, she thought about the future. She thought about all the things she had once imagined, growing old with Ryan, building a life together, having children, watching them grow. But that future was no longer hers. It had slipped away like sand through her fingers. She thought about how, in the end, it wasn't Ryan who had failed their marriage, it was her. She had been so consumed with her own sense of entitlement, so sure that he would always be there, that she had never truly given him the respect he deserved. And now, it was too late to fix it. Lauren didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just lay there in the silence, letting the weight of everything wash over her. She had lost more than just a partner. She had lost the one person who had loved her unconditionally, who had been there through thick and thin, and she would never get that back. In the end, the truth was this. Ryan had walked away, not because of one moment, but because of every moment that had led up to it. Every time she had taken him for granted, every time she had dismissed his feelings, every time she had treated him like he was less important than her own desires. Ryan had endured it all, but even the strongest person had their breaking point, and now he was gone, leaving her with nothing but the bitter realization of what she had lost. The silence in the house was louder than any words. It was final, and there was no coming back from it.